and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about how to color your Yucca fiber to make cordage that's more interesting and more colorful. So we're going to start with a natural colored Yucca fiber, which is a bit of a straw color, very pale, and we're going to add some color to it to liven it up. Today I've got several examples that we're going to talk about. The primary thing that we're going to do is use this red beet and chop it up and add a little bit of water and set it on to boil and extract the red color from this beet, and it makes a very bright, nice color for the Yucca cordage. And so we'll demonstrate how to go from a plant material, the beet, to dyed cordage. And along with that, I brought some samples of other natural dye material that I've used in the past. This very dark brown liquid is a tea made from the husks of black walnuts. The husk on the black walnut's shell creates a very dark brown dye, and simply letting the husks sit in water over a period of 4 to 6 weeks, no heat was applied, simply letting it brew over time, or let the color seep out of the husk into the water over time. That can be a strategy of extracting dye. Today we're going to use the heat to speed that process up. Other dye that I have here, this is yellow onion skin. I have here a sample of dye that was extracted from the prickly pear cactus fruit. Somewhat red, but it's on the side of being pink. For demonstration today, have the sawdust from orange osage, and this will be made into a tea that will be used to color some Yucca cordage today. And for equipment, have a propane tank and a propane stove top. Going to use those. Also have a strainer, filters that'll be used to separate the tea from the solid materials. And have some jars here, just cleaned up containers from food stuff to use to let the cordage soak in. Another container and a couple of pots. As I mentioned, using a stovetop to heat the material to speed up the process of extracting the color. Going to use a couple of camp stoves. Camera at this point so that we can get a little better angle. And with the camera repositioned, we're going to begin processing the beet down into red dye for the Yucca cordage. So here goes. And just slicing the beet into cubes. I may actually skip part of this process and speed up the recording. The idea being chop the beet into small enough pieces so that it cooks fairly quickly. You could be preparing the beets exactly like you would to make beets for dinner. Slices you would use for your dinner table and could be used for dye. Beet has been sliced up and water has been added to be able to extract the red color from the red beet. We'll set it on a stovetop and get it boiling. The stove is lit and we're heating up the water. As we're heating up the water for the beet broth, or for the red color for the beet juice, going to do another pot and add orange osage as the coloring agent. This is going to be a bit more of a yellow, orange-yellow color, and we'll just add the sawdust right to the pan, add some water, and let it sit as the red beet is boiling. Here we're adding water, and we'll give that a few minutes to soak, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And here we have switched over the beet, and the orange osage is now on the stove top. And alternating it with the beet And as I've alternated back and forth, that keeps them both at about boiling temperature and lets me do both at the same time. So, and checking back in on the beets here on the stovetop. Beets are boiling really nicely, and the red color that's soaking into the water is becoming very apparent, that the water is turning red. And the time on the beets has been about 15-20 minutes, and their consistency is starting to be about the consistency that I would prepare them for eating. So they're really close, and we're going to switch these up. The orange asage is starting to turn the water a little bit yellow, a little bit orange. And we're going to switch these on the stove. And orange asage is on the stove, and we're going to strain the beet juice. So for that, I have a strainer. I have a jar that we're going to put the juice into. And using the strainer, we'll be able to separate it out, pouring the juice in. Just like so. And that is finished. So juice from the beet. You can see how red of a color that is. We're just going to take this length of fiber right here, going to do a sample amount just for the demonstration. And by rolling it like so, and then putting a little twist in it, that'll help keep it manageable so that it's easy to handle. We're going to put it into the jar and give it a quick swirl. You can see how the color of the red is dyeing into the fibers. And ideally, it would sit, drain it off, and then let the fibers dry after a mordant has been added. So with that, we'll switch the fire off. And there we go. Now, the orange asage has been cooking for the same time as the beets. And we're going to go ahead and strain it off. Pour that just like that. Here we have the broth or the juice off of the orange asage, and it is a bit of an orange color. And while it could be filtered with a coffee filter, it could also be used just as it is. Using more of the fiber that was from a previous processing video, we're going to take some of this fiber and put it into the orange coloring from the orange asage. So this is the process that you would use for a variety of different materials for the natural food dyes. And we'll move on to the next step. And here we'll add some fibers to the prickly pear cacti berry juice. And this was made exactly the same way that I made the beet dye, chopping the fruit up and then adding some water and putting it on to boil, giving it about 15 minutes to boil, and then straining the juice off. The color quickly goes into the fiber. The beet is in this jar and it's starting to take on that red color nicely. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. So having let the orange asage soak for a period of time, we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the mordant process. Bring that in so it's good for the camera to see. And there it is. Got a bit of a yellow color to it. As we're pulling the fiber out of the coloring agent, we're going to do the mordant process. And for this, I simply add the fiber into a Ziploc bag, like so, and then adding a bit of salt to help set the color. And for this, I'm going to add just enough of the coloring water. Then I'm going to add some salt. And salt becomes a mordant to lock the color in so that it doesn't get on hands and clothes, and so that it doesn't wash out with any water that touches it, and helps it to last a little bit longer. So with the salt in the bag, gonna let that sit overnight, and then tomorrow simply lay the fiber out to dry. And after it's been dried, then it can be woven into cordage. I've made cordage out of the orange Asage colored Yucca fiber, and this is the color that we've gotten here in contrast to the natural color. And so you can see how it's a very bright yellow color. It's very impressive. And now would be a good time to share a contrast of other materials that have been used for dyes. So here goes. This is a dye used with the turmeric spice, and cordage was created, a very nice thin cordage here, out of the yellow turmeric. Salt being used as a mordant so that the yellow color doesn't transfer to hands and clothing if the cordage were to get wet or damp. And here we have the beet colored fiber. It is the color of red that we were able to get, and I'll contrast that with the natural fiber here. So you can see both the fiber, also the cordage, turns out with a red, slightly purple hue to it. And next up, we have the fiber that was dyed using the prickly pear cacti fruit juice. And here we see the color contrasting with the natural fiber, and also have a little bit of a contrast here to show where the beet juice colors a little bit differently than the prickly pear. And we'll introduce another color, and this is a cabbage dye. This was a red cabbage, and I'm contrasting it. We have the prickly pear cacti, the berry fruit color here, the natural fiber here, and this is the beet fiber in the back, and the cabbage fiber in the front. They're very close in color. Not sure how well it shows up on the camera, but they're a very similar color. And the usefulness of either the cabbage and the beet has been working well in the samples that I've created using those colors. Using the black walnut husk, and this is a very brown color, which in contrast to the other colors is a good complement to the color palette and contrasts very nicely with the natural color. So the black walnut husk, the fiber that was dyed using yellow onion skin, not as yellow as the turmeric and not nearly as yellow as the orange Asage color in the light here. So we have the orange Asage, we have turmeric, and we have yellow onion skin for the different colors of yellow. And those have all turned out very nicely. And here's a small sample of fiber that was dyed using the soaking liquid off of black bean soup. And it creates a rather dark, it's not quite black, but it creates a dark contrasting color for the Yucca cordage. That gives you an idea of how those colors turn out in contrast to the natural fiber. Hope you enjoyed the video and look forward to seeing you in the next one.